What do you mean by it's different?
It's different because the entire culture is different. The way that people are making decisions is different. The way that people can vote is different. There are all of these ways that are different.
I mean,
So,
yeah, black people were not, they couldn't really vote. I mean, I guess it's not that different now because there's many different ways of legally restricting black people from voting. But that's more complex. But ultimately, the methods were unlawful. The point I was trying to arrive at here is that the methods were unlawful. They were seen as unlawful. They were seen as they were met with a lot of police resistance, and ultimately that police resistance led to a shit ton of violence. And people were talking about the chaos in the exact same terms and in the exact same boundaries as they do right now with respect to the Palestinian pro-Palestinian encampments. But ultimately, these students are following on the footsteps of those who fought bravely for civil rights and fought bravely against the Vietnam War. In some instances, occupying the exact same spaces.
oh, I mean, like, and I understand that. I have no problem with them doing that, but I do have a problem doing it whenever it's destroying property and taking away other people's education.
But
And I
but
think
they
that's
said
really
that
what.
about the civil rights movement as well, is what I mean. Like they ultimately, I think I'm glad that they had the ends justify the means attitude during the civil rights movement. And I'm glad that they had a ends justify the means attitude during the Vietnam War protests or during the
I think
boycott,
that
divestment, and sanctions
I think
protests
those
against.
conflicts are way more complex than that.
Well,
I don't think you can
BDS
say
is
that.
identical. It's the same exact. It's literally like almost definitionally identical. It's a boycott, divestment, and sanctions on apartheid South Africa in 1985. This was also another student-led movement as well, and the methods were identical too. The only difference is South Africa did not have the benefit of having another South Africa that they could learn the mistakes from and make sure that
Mhm.
they don't repeat it. Israel had South Africa to look to, so they could like set up a lobbying effort and ensure that the state bends to their will as to the best of their ability, and the media apparatus as well.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely Israel is much more influential than that. I mean, I can see where you're coming from. I think that that type of mindset is very scary to me because while you're right that it does create a lot of positive outcomes, it also creates a lot of negative outcomes as well.
Do you have examples
And
of the negative outcomes? Like as far as a democratically organized revolutionary movement?
um, what do you mean by that?
Like is
Like the
there
negative out, like, well, I'm just
like
saying
like
that
is
if
there
you,
is there an example that you can give me throughout history where people organized on certain boundaries that were like democratically organized on certain boundaries and they like enforced the tyranny of majority and like something awful happened as a consequence of that?
I'm sure I could think of some. I mean, absolutely. And I think it happens all the time on a very basic level. Like, for example, like during the BLM riots, people were obviously burning down buildings and doing things like that. That's something I don't really support, and I don't think that that's beneficial, and I'm never going to support that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not helping anybody. It's not doing anything for anyone. It's purely destructive, and I don't think that people have a right to do that. I think that yeah, you should have the right to protest, but if you use the justification for the ends justify the means, then I think that anybody can use that justification, and that justification can be used for malicious reasons. And there's the only way to have a world that's fair is to have some sort of generally accepted rules, and that's what we have for laws. And I see where you're coming from with the civil rights movement, but you have to see the perspective that I have too, that if you allow people to just, justify themselves by thinking, well, our cause is righteous, so it's okay for us to do it, it would immediately cause huge amounts of chaos.
Yeah, because no, I understand. This is exactly the same arguments launched against the civil rights movement as well. MLK spoke on this
Yeah.
with great frequency, where in the eyes of those who are being wronged, or in their experiences, not even in their own perspective, their regular existence is chaotic, right? And And this is from letter from Birmingham jail, where he talks specifically about the white moderate, where he talks about the white moderate who places a timeline on another man's emancipation and another man's justice, that says your methods and your means of protest are actually not right, or now is not the time. Where he very specifically talks about people who were naysayers to the civil rights movement, who said, like, oh no, now is not the time, or things are actually much better than they would be if black people were still enslaved, and there's too much property damage happening. The point is, from their perspective at that time, for black people, especially living in the segregated South, or even redlined in the North, America was consistently chaotic, and it still is for many people of color, especially
I think also
living
it's
in.
important to keep in mind, like you're talking about Martin Luther King, he also explicitly was against blocking transportation. And so there were lines even that he had.
Wait, Martin Luther King also participated in the Montgomery bus boycott.
Let me see if I can
Right.
I don't know if I can link this.
He led the
Give me a minute.
Montgomery bus boycott for 382 days, which officially ended on December 20th, 1956. That's like, I mean,
I
that
sent you a link in the chat.
in the Discord chat.
Yeah.
What is this? Farmer King and Lewis, along with millions of Americans, struggle to figure out what would amount to legitimate, appropriate forms of nonviolent protest. Tactics dramatic enough to make their impact, but not so disruptive as to alienate supporters. Okay. Everyone could agree on the nobility, even the genius of the original sit-ins, conducted with such dignity that their moral power was overwhelming. What is this? At an early press conference, an organizer with King's Southern Christian Leadership Conference declared, "We will tie up public transportation by laying our bodies prostrate on the runways of airports across railroad tracks." This degree of disorder was too much even for King, who walked back the staffers' comments. Over the summer, as the Kennedy administration reversed course to support the march, Rustin realized that attracting hundreds of thousands of marchers he desired meant abandoning the controversial tactics that would alienate the mainstream. In the end, as comedian and activist Dick Gregory said, the march went off like a Sunday church picnic. Ultimately, these protests at the time were still declared disruptive, though. You understand that, right? Like every single instance, including the Montgomery bus boycott, was declared to be disruptive, and at the time, and was violently suppressed by the state. Like none of these protests, not a single one of these protests, actually was met with hugs and kisses, and the state being like, you know what, you guys are making a sound argument. And at the
My point that I'm
time,
making
the
is that
coverage.
I think that whenever you justify, like you can't just do anything that you want whenever you've decided that you have the moral authority to do that. Like it's very easy to go and look at the civil rights movement and say, well, they did this to an extent, so it's okay for us to do it. But if you apply this to real life, I don't think that it really works. Like just because you're morally aggrieved about something, it doesn't give you the right to destroy other people's property, to stay on their property, or to do things that hurt other people.
Well, the
Like
property is not their
your
property. We established that. Like this is, they participated in sit-ins in colleges in the civil rights movement as well. They were doing exactly the same stuff that these students are doing, if not much more militant. There's also another side of the civil rights movement that often doesn't get discussed in mainstream media or in our schools in general, that also played a significant role, according to MLK as well, which was the more militant action where black people would demonstrate with weapons or directly get into active confrontation with the police and like shootouts and whatnot. Now, that did play a role in increasing pressure points for the state to look at the more reasonable parties, the peaceful demonstrations, and concede to the demands being made by all of the parties. So all of this played an active role. You can't have one without the other, is what I mean. But even in this circumstance, we're looking at only one aspect: the civil disobedience of
I
the
think that
civil rights movement.
right. You're right whenever you say you can't have one without the other, but I don't think that that being an inevitability justifies the other. So you're right.
But they haven't even reached that point, is what I'm saying. We're currently in the beginning stages we're currently in the stage where we're getting upset and using ruthless police ruthless police tactics to stop peaceful demonstrations from occurring. Like these demonstrations have not even met like the civil disobedience metrics of the civil rights movement even.
Yeah. I think that really, I mean, I'll go back to what I said initially. I don't think that a group of students should be able to go into the university and just start camping out there
But
until
ultimately,
they're
there's no there. The point is like there's nothing that they can do, right? Like, because I asked like, what can they do then? And you said that they should just go to a different university. Well, what
oh,
happens when that university
like,
also has endowments?
well, I mean, to a certain extent, the world is not obligated to appeal to you. The world, like, if other people don't want to do what you want, then it's not like everybody has to find a way that it's okay for you to do that. Like, if other people don't want to agree with you, it's not your right to force them to agree with you. That's crazy.
Yeah, this isn't about other people forcing other people to agree with you. That's more so about getting the state to follow through on what the majority opinion is in many instances, or in some instances, not the majority opinion, but it's like the morally righteous thing to do. Like in the civil rights movement, I would say, despite the fact that it was not the majority opinion, I think you and I both agree that the civil rights movement was objectively a good thing, and the methods were infinitely more disruptive at the time than what the pro-Palestinian side has done so far in terms of college
Oh, I
campuses
think
and everywhere around.
that is guaranteed. You're totally right about that. Obviously, it's not as bad as civil rights. It's not even remotely as close. I also don't think it's as extreme. Like, obviously, civil rights was something that was happening in America to Americans at that exact moment. What's happening over at Israel is much more disconnected from us. I don't really ever see
Well,
that being on the same
the
level.
disconnection does stem. You're right. One is a domestic issue, one is foreign policy. The disconnection stems from the fact that most people don't really truly understand that, like, as Eisenhower once famously said,
What's my
every
investment?
dollar,
Yeah.
no, every no, every dollar being spent on a rocket is a dollar that could be spent on building American roads, building
Well,
American bricks.
that's the thing. No, I agree with you. Like, I completely agree with you on that. But I think that the way that you stop that is by voting for people that also agree with you and that are going to push those policies through. I don't think that it's reliable enough, and I don't think it's effective enough to try to do what they're doing and hope that, because, like, and I can only speak for like myself and what I've seen. I feel like the way that a lot of those people, the protesters, have conducted themselves and what they're doing, I think a lot of people don't like it. And I feel like it's alienated a lot of different people, and I don't think it's helped at all.
I think that
Um, y-
I think that the mainstream
and,
media definitely massages the narrative in a certain direction. A lot of people probably see
uh,
them and only hear about how anti-Semitic they are, even though that's not the case.
well,
So that
here's
definitely
also
plays a role.
is like, I like my community. Like, obviously, that's the viewpoint that I have, right? But like, I'm sure your community probably disagrees with me on this, and like,
Yes.
you guys, yeah, yeah, I bet. And so, like, yeah, you guys probably have like the opposite, like probably like 90-10 or like 80-20 that I do. And so it's very hard for me really to say for sure. But I do think that by doing that, or like by the protests, like, I don't really know if it's really helped the cause hardly at all.
Well,
And I
it
think the
seems
only,
like polling is still pretty consistent and consistently favoring the Palestinian side on this matter.
at
That's
least for
just
the, that's what you said, yeah.
yeah. So the student led protests have not, as far as I've seen, have not actually changed the public opinion and public attitude. And I'm willing to bet that the violent suppression of the state for these otherwise peaceful demonstrations, no matter how hard the media massages the narrative, will most likely lead to larger and larger demonstrations. There's only too many old white ladies that cops can brutalize because they're saying don't do a genocide in my name, until the American public goes, holy shit, okay, this is too far. And the greatest example I can give you is that Israel personally had killed 200 humanitarian aid workers up until a couple of weeks prior. And obviously, that kind of information wasn't really breaching the public consciousness as hard as when Israel killed 7 white aid workers from the World Central Kitchen. That was a big turning point where the majority, even of older people, said, all right, they've gone too far. This is unconscionable. This is, you know, this is beyond the pale. And I
It's
suspect
surprising
that
to me that America pushes Israel so hard. I don't really understand the reason why. I mean, like, of course, it's probably just money, but it's very surprising for me to see it happen. It seems like it's almost there's like a level of dissonance there because
it comes
especially
from
like
strategic interest, strategic importance. Israel is our forward operating base in a resource rich region that
yeah,
that we are very fond of having there. It's destabilizing power against all
yeah.
of these scary enemies that we have that shouldn't really be enemies at all, but we've declared them to be. So that's the reason. That's the major reason as to why we are so unconditionally offering full throated support to Israel, no matter what the fuck they do.
I think that you're completely right, actually. And like, and the reason why I said I don't know is because, like, I'm happy to hear you say that because I've always felt like kind of a conspiracy theorist that like Israel exists basically to, create unrest or destabilize the Middle East. So, it's
Yeah, I
good
mean,
at least,
it's a settler colony. It
you
started
know.
off as a British settler colonial project, and it continued as we took over the torch from the British when we became the dominant global superpower, and we continued that exact same project. And that is the major role that Israel plays for us. It's not like Jews are powerful and monolithically,
Yeah.
in a scary way controlling the media or some shit like that. It's just that like Jews argue with one another all the fucking time. There is a significantly larger group of American evangelical Zionists that are responsible for a lot more donations going into Israel, specifically in places like Texas, as a matter of fact, and all around, all those mega churches in your, around where you live, they are all way bigger dick riders of Israel, despite the fact that they hold anti-Semitic beliefs sometimes
I
themselves.
don't fucking understand it either, man. I
Yeah,
I
no,
don't so dumb.
it's a theological justification that they have. They believe that Jesus Christ is going to come back to earth and the rapture is going to happen, and that
They'll be good ones and they go to heaven.
yeah, they Jews will of course burn in hell in that process unless they convert to evangelical Christianity. But this is a good tactical ally for the time being in order to create the conditions for the rapture, which means that all that entire land must be dominated by Jews and Jews only. So that's the overarching goal for a lot of evangelical Zionists in this country, and they far outnumber Jews. This is why I always say, if every single American Jew, and there's 6 million of them, decided tomorrow that like Israel would still be allowed to operate in the exact same way, and America would still give Israel all of the fucking money and all of the political power to do whatever the fuck they want to do, because it doesn't have anything to do with American Jews as much as it has something to do with American interest in the region.
Yeah, no, I think that you're right. Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I said that in my chat. I mean, I even said like I don't know if this is going to be a bad take, but I wouldn't have been surprised if the Israel knew that October 7th stuff was going to happen. I wouldn't be surprised if they let it happen.
I don't know if I wouldn't go that far. I mean, I think that it's their arrogance and their
Yeah.
hubris that caused October 7th to happen. The arrogance that they think that they could have an apartheid and violently suppress 5 million Palestinians, 2.5 in Gaza in an open air prison, and 2.5 in the West Bank in a permanent occupation with like steady rounds of pogroms and forcible expulsion from their own lands, without any sort of without incurring any sort of cost to their own security. Many other regional operatives actually informed the Israeli government, and they basically cast it aside, saying Palestinians, they can't do shit. And it turns out they can actually do shit, and that you can't really keep pressuring people over and over again and trap them in like inhumane conditions and expect them not to lash out and retaliate. but it's that very same
Well,
arrogance. But it is more so arrogance than
I think that's what.
some conspiracy.
Yeah,
'Cause
I mean, I don't know. Like, that's why I was kind of curious. Like, what do you think is going to happen? Like, what do you like in 20 years? Like, what do you think the resolution of this is going to be?
I don't know. I genuinely don't know. I think that we are in. I've been covering Israel Palestine publicly for the past 10 years. I've been a supporter of Palestinian emancipation, and I've never seen this level of Western support in my entire life. 10 years ago, if you said the things that I'm saying right now, immediately everyone would be like, oh, you're anti Semitic. Fuck off.
Yeah,
And that was very powerful. That was like, that immediately would stop any kind of conversation because nobody wants to be called anti Semitic. The fuck, especially in progressive circles. Like, why?
yeah.
And that is a true form of bigotry, obviously, and one that is ever present.
Well, that's what makes it even worse to accuse without it being true.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah, the
the
real ones.
fact that, like, while I was very critical of ADL for a very long time, the fact that there's like actual journalism being conducted on the apartheid defense league's hate crime statistics is like wild. This was something that would be considered a non-starter. Even I would, if someone came to me fucking 5-6 years ago and we're like, let's look at the Jewish hate crime statistics, actually, I'd be like, get the fuck out of here, dude. What kind of fucking Nazi shit is this?
Yeah.
And now you openly do see it, though. Jonathan Greenblatt, the president of ADL, who very famously was caught caught in a phone conversation talking about the dangers that TikTok presents, has changed the designation, directly changed the designation of anti-Semitism to criticisms of Israel. Anytime someone sees a Jewish student, for example, sees a placard that says "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," or "Free Palestine," or whatever, that is now declared an anti-Semitic hate crime. Like, it is unconscionable to weaponize Judaism in an effort to defend the state of Israel and its awful actions against the Palestinian population and everyone around. It's ridiculous, especially when anti-Semitism does increase in times of Israel's like sieges and violent, abhorrent actions in general. Like real anti-Semitism, I mean.
I think that's what happens, right? And you see a lot of it on Twitter, right? I mean, somebody I read is getting unbanned now, and so there's going to be a lot more of it.
Yeah, I mean his little fucking Groyper shithead fan base is always all around. They've never stopped. So it's not shocking. It's not shocking that Elon Musk would make such a decision. So I don't, I think that is ridiculous. And Elon Musk is like the number one free speech for me, not for the ass dude in general. He also claims to be a champion of free speech, but routinely suppresses speech that he doesn't like, that bother him. Talks about community notes, but then literally will take down community notes from his own form of misinformation. And he does it in like very thin-skinned ways.
Notes. I am a huge fan of community notes.
Yeah, but community notes work if they're not, one, brigaded, and two, community notes work if you can also do community notes on Elon Musk or community notes on like the chain, for example. A cop after Columbia University showed up on Morning Joe and was like, "This is a chain that we found on all the doors in Hamilton Hall," and he claimed that was the reason why they believed that it was outside agitators that were participating in the sit-in, that were participating in the takeover of Hamilton Hall. The community notes immediately swarmed it and were like, "What the fuck are you talking about? That chain is literally on discount." That chain is literally on discount on the Columbia Public Safety website, and that community note perished suspiciously. So community notes in that situation, if you have it for some but not all, can still serve a very nefarious propaganda purpose. It makes you feel like there's counters. What's up?
If only one side is getting fact checked, then you might as well not do it.
Well, I mean, I'm in favor of community notes. I'm just saying that like
they
it's
should
something to always keep in consideration.
ridiculous that, if Elon Musk is deleting his own community notes, yeah, that's stupid as fuck. Absolutely.
Exactly. And I think that
Yeah.
that is like, because then there's much more nefarious there's a much more nefarious reason for community notes. So then it makes people falsely believe that, well, there's no community notes on this, so it must be real, right?
Yeah. Oh no, I think that definitely happens. I
Yeah.
mean, I do like it, but I'm a fan of community notes, but I think that there are always going to be drawbacks to things, and I think that is one of
Yeah.
them. You're right.
Just like free speech. There's
Ye-
always free speech for peaceful demonstration and peaceful protest when, Nazis or whoever the fuck want to do it. But if you don't have it for the other side, if you don't have it for, people who want to criticize Israel, even if
Well,
they
that's
aren't
what we're
being
doing.
anti-Semitic,
Yeah.
then all of a
Well, I was going
sudden,
to
you know,
about the was it like 2 days ago? Yeah, with like all those people attacking the encampment. Like, if you don't like the encampment, that's fine, but it's not your decision to make whether they should be there or not.
yeah. But like I said, that's also why I don't believe that the university should have taken the actions that it took and then lied under false premises to the students to act like the police presence that they brought about the encampment was actually for their own good, for their own
Yeah.
benefit, for their own safety. Be honest about it. Be like, yeah, we don't like that you fucking have a tent in the middle of the courtyard and we need you to shut the fuck up, please. I mean,
Yeah.
I would of course still support the students and I would still get very mad, but ultimately, at least they be honest in why they're doing it.
I agree with you. And yeah, I mean, I think that, it's a matter of degree. And, to me, I think that, some things are over the line. If you don't think that, then that's kind of like your opinion, and that's fine. But uh, I do hope that they can keep protesting without doing anything crazy, right? I mean, like, I think it's a good cause.
They will most likely go back and do encampments. They will continue protesting, very likely in probably
Yeah.
larger numbers now that the police have responded in such brutal ways, which will inevitably force the university's hand to take action in the positive direction. This is usually how it goes, at least throughout history. That's usually how it's worked out.
Yeah. I mean, we'll just have to wait and see. I actually, the river from the river to the sea, a lot of people think that's a genocide chant. Is it?
No, it is
Well, I
a.
mean, but I mean, the thing is, man, like, I'm gonna be honest. I think it is, and that's why I'm asking you.
Why do you think it is?
Well, the reason why I think it is because if you go from the river from the sea to the sea, you would have to get rid of Israel, wouldn't you?
No, it means Palestine will be free, as in Palestinians will have dignity and will have humanity and will have civil liberties. It doesn't mean that, like, the Jews that live there have to go away.
So you think that saying doesn't have anything to do with like getting rid of Israel or anything like that?
I think that Israel, in the current formation, in the way that it exists currently as an apartheid regime, yes, that must not exist. I do agree. That should be abolished. And I think that's what that slogan means. And for many people who are like, no, I'm really fond of Israel the way it currently is, they basically attribute living alongside Palestinians with like full rights and civil liberties would be akin to the genocide. It's ridiculous, but unfortunately, that is an attitude that is ever present. And maybe even normally I would consider it to be borderline hysterical, which I still think it is hysterical. However, it doesn't take away from the fact that people do legitimately believe that. Like, they do think that if Israel is not like a Jewish supremacist ethno state, that, like, I think a lot of people do, as a consequence of social conditioning, legitimately believe that if it's no longer an ethno state, then, like, Holocaust 2 Electric Boogaloo for sure.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that's why, like, because I mean, like, everybody that I've like heard like talking about it, like, that's kind of the implication is like they say, oh, it's a genocide, and I I pretty much assumed that you wouldn't think that. That's why I asked you, because it's
I
like
don't.
I've never really heard like another perspective on it. I was curious.
It's another way to just try and suppress any kind of protest, because ultimately the cause isn't, ultimately the goal isn't to you know, make sure that the optics of the Palestinian side is actually super intact and super viable. The goal is to get him to shut the fuck up. So
Yeah.
you're going to do whatever you can and use whatever organs of the government you can to tell them to shut the fuck up in different ways. It's a multi-prong approach. It's ironic because like from the river to the sea, Israel is all you'll see is one the early Likud charter. Likud is the party that Benjamin Netanyahu is the leader of, and I think it's like literally Benjamin Netanyahu has said that as well. And it's ironic because like they are doing the genocide. The Israeli side is doing the genocide. So for them to say it, it's like, well, yeah, I mean that does become like a very real, very active genocide in that situation. I think that overall though, like hyper focusing on these sorts of slogans and saying that they're genocidal inherently is just another way to try and put hurdles on the Palestinian side of the protests.
It's not really productive, and it doesn't really it doesn't really lead to any conversation. It's just a way to shut down what somebody else is saying. I think that you're
Yeah.
right. I think it's the same thing with like calling things anti-Semitic.
Yeah,
It's like
no,
people
it is. Yeah.
people to stop talking about it. That's the goal.
Yeah, absolutely. And Congress is now also, you know, instead of saying, "Hey, man, this stuff is really unpopular by
Yeah.
the broadest American populations, like unlike anything else, maybe we should, I don't know, dial it back a little bit. Maybe we should restrain Israel, which would not exist as a state without our, you know, consistent aid."
Yes.
And instead of doing all that, Congress has only moved in one direction and one direction only.
Yeah.
Tom Cotton, the senator from Arkansas, earlier today was talking about how like these guys are all jihadis. These are little Gazas. They're disgusting Islamists. Like talking about the American protesters that are pro-Palestinian, pro-Palestine, and like that never gets a censure. But Rashida Tlaib, the Palestinian congresswoman, saying "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," that gets censured. So it's always one direction in the American government, and unfortunately, it's not a good direction.
I think what's scary about it is that it seems like it's very much not representative, at least from what I see on social media.
Well, there's a reason why Congress is always barely treading above a 30% approval rating. It's because we all inherently, no matter what our political positions are, we all inherently understand that these fucking politicians don't actually represent our interests at all, and only represent the interests of corporations and the wealthy. And the military industrial complex is a very viable, perhaps the most viable constituency. So they care about that a lot more than they care about, I don't know, healthcare or roads or infrastructure.
Crazy. Like I don't know. Like I mean, again, I think that a lot of times, like, you know, I might disagree with you on like kind of like the methodology of the protest, but I agree with you about these problems. I think that they're very fucking legitimate. And I hope people finally, I wish more people would actually vote and actually be activists, you know, actually do something or talk about it.
Well, a lot of the people that do participate in activism are oftentimes also the very same people that do go out and vote. Contrary to what popular opinion is, those are the guys who are at the forefront of voting. Many people always say,
like,
I'm anti-voting. I'm not. I love
Oh yeah,
voting.
no, you're not anti-voting, right? I know that. It's just that I think that it's just disappointing because yeah, sure, like probably a lot of people that are watching this stream, people that are watching maybe my stream and especially your stream, like they vote, but it's all the other demoralized people that don't and
Yeah,
don't do
but
anything
in
and
that
just let things.
situation, I do think that it's the fault of our politicians, because you got to give people something to vote for. People aren't civic minded, especially in the United States of America, where we don't even have compulsory voting. And on top of not having compulsory voting, we have deliberately made attempts to make voting as hard as possible. One of the easiest ways to increase voter participation, like we did in the 2020 elections, is to make voting easier. Universal ballot access, a mail-in ballot access, universal voter registration. Those were two reasons why the 2020 elections had the highest voter participation in decades. So there are many initiatives out there specifically to stop people from going out to vote. But beyond that, I think one thing that the politicians could do, especially the Democratic Party could do, is to give people something to vote for, to show people that, like, when you do vote for us, we won't go back on our promises that we made, and we will follow through, and we won't leave your ass in the fucking dark, and we will do our very hardest to fight for your rights and your civil liberties, with the same intensity that the Republicans regularly fight to take away people's civil liberties. And I think they do a really good job at it.
They do give people something to fight for, right? You look at like Trump in 2016, it gave people something to fight for.
Yeah.
Even if it's misguided or you disagree with it. And Bernie Sanders gave people something to fight for. And I think that you're right. And I don't know why.
Would definitely, like, not putting Hillary Clinton up would be a great way to fucking motivate people to go out and vote.
I don't know why. That's crazy.
Because ultimately, when it comes down to it, I am a firm believer that we do obviously have disagreements. Like the Democratic Party and the Republican Party definitely does have policy disagreements. But ultimately, on matters that pertain to the economy broadly, or deregulation, or more importantly than both of those things, war, endless war, there is always bipartisan support. Just like there's always money in the banana stand for more war. Never any money for healthcare. Never any money for, infrastructure spending, but certainly a shit ton of money for war and more war. That's what I think.
Yeah. I don't know how it keeps happening, honestly. I think that the problem is that, like, it's like you ask yourself, why are people not out at the Capitol right now, demanding immediate resignations? And then somebody says, well, it's because you're not there. And it's like, well, you're not there because they're not there. And then, it's just 2 or 4 more years of the same thing. It's very hard to know how to, like, motivate people to feel like they have any sort of real control over things.
Yeah, absolutely. And but that goes back to exactly what I was saying with respect to these protests, the pro-Palestinian protests, because it gets people very motivated.
I do. I see your perspective. I mean, again, like, if I might disagree on the intensity of it or the amount of it that you're doing, that's really kind of I think that's not really a big point. Overall, I do want to see more people protesting this stuff, because I think it's a huge waste of everybody's fucking money. And like, you're like, I'm the same as you, right? Like, we're both paying a lot of fucking money in taxes, and it's getting wasted.
Bro, you're about to, you keep talking, you're about to fucking participate in the Austin, Texas protest, dude. What's happening? Are we about to see you next to Milena and Caroline next time at the Palestinian demonstrations?
About 15 years ago, you would have. I signed up to work at Greenpeace to promote Planned Parenthood and all this other stuff in like 2009. Yeah.
Damn, that's crazy.
I had like an Obama poster in my house and everything. And, I was always very political, and, I was a big promoter of that stuff. And, like, I absolutely support it. Yeah. I mean, that's why I talk about it. Right. I mean, because I know that, it's the same with you, right? I mean, like, you get so much fucking hate. Like, I get people that are mad at me all the fucking time. And it's like, you still do it. And at least I still do it, because it's like, this is what I believe in. I want to do this. And, if people are going to get mad at me for it, then that's just the price you pay.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there's definitely more of that. There's definitely more of a price than just people getting mad at you, but it is what it is,
Yeah.
All right. Well, I got to go pee, but thank you for coming on.
Chipotle soon. So, yeah, I've got a very busy day ahead of me.
All right. Have a good
Well,
one.
thanks. I had a good time. I hope the chat enjoyed it too.
Yeah. All right. Bye.
Peace.
All right. That was ASMONGOLD on protests and